We ask you to please take your seats and silence your wireless devices as our program is about to begin. Thank you. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please take your seats. Our program is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage 2023 ALEC National Chairman, Florida House of Representatives, Speaker Designate Daniel A. Perez.
All right. If everyone can take their seats, we're going to get the program started here. Thank you. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the final day of ALEC's 2023 States and Nation Policy Summit. It's going to be an action-packed afternoon, of course, so let's start things off. I'd like to invite one of our 50 under 50 members, Kansas State Rep Patrick Penn, to come up on stage and lead us in prayer.
Good afternoon. Please bow with me. Father, we come to you this afternoon as humbly as we know how, with great reverence and great respect. We thank you for the provision of this beautiful day, this wonderful ALEC conference, and the fruitful fellowship of both old and new friends from all across our great nation. Lord, you're the God of life, of liberty, and love. And right now we have some dark days and some perilous times, so we pray for our law enforcement officers, for our military members and their families, and for the peace of the people of Israel. Lord, we also are grateful to the ALEC organization, its wonderful staff, and its wondrous work for over the past 50 years, especially under the steady and visionary leadership of our outgoing chairman, Daniel Perez. You've blessed us all as a team through him, and we ask that you continue to strengthen and bless Chairman Perez in his upcoming speakership. And as we celebrate the peaceful transition of this leadership to the incoming administration of Chairman Ty Masterson, my senator from Kansas, we ask that you guide, safeguard, and bless Chairman Masterson with the double portion of your grace and wisdom to lead ALEC as the mantle passes. Bless their families for allowing us to borrow their talents and their time, and bless ALEC as it steps into another 50 years of championing the policies that promote and deliver upon limited government, free markets, federalism. Finally, Lord, I ask that you please bless Marco and his staff, his wondrous wait staff here at the Westin Hotel, and give them and their families your provision and protection always. And bless this food, making a nourishment for our bodies. Bless the hands that prepared it. Bless our continuing conversation, and give your angels charge over all of our members as they travel and depart this place, never from your presence. I pray all of this in your magnificent name, and all of God's people say amen and amen.
Thank you. Just want to say, Thank you very much, Patrick. And I don't know if you all were able to hear him speak at the 50 Under 50 Gala, but he did a phenomenal job. He's a good man, and we're lucky to have you. Thanks for being here. The Scalia Award for Restoring the Balance of Government was created last year in honor of the famed Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Presented to leaders in the legal profession with a record of defending the ALEC principles of free markets, limited government, and federalism, we specifically focus on those who actively worked to diminish the role and influence to the federal government in their states' affairs. That describes Arizona Supreme Court Justice Clint Bolick perfectly, absolutely perfectly. And at the Institute for Justice, Alliance for School Choice, and the Goldwater Institute, Justice Bolick fought to support small businesses, support school choice, and protect free speech. Ladies and gentlemen, ALEC's 2023 Scalia Award for Restoring the Balance of Government winner, Arizona Supreme Court Justice Clint Bolick.
Well, thank you so much for that incredible honor. And I even see a gavel up here, so I really feel at home. I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to receive an award named after Antonin Scalia. As a member of the Arizona Supreme Court, I esteem him, I try to channel him, and I even wear him. When I was appointed to the Supreme Court by Governor Doug Ducey, and I joined the court, I had not expected to ever be a judge, and certainly not on the Arizona Supreme Court. And when I went into my office, which was literally empty, I didn't have a single staffer. I didn't really know what to expect, and I asked the Chief Justice, Scott Bales, who is the most liberal member of our court, I said, oh boy, was this a naive question. Is there sort of like a handbook for being a judge? And he laughed and he said, no. But he said, there is one book that you have to buy, and that is Antonin Scalia's book called Reading Law. And this book, there's not a week that goes by that I don't consult this book for statutory and constitutional interpretation. And I've often thought, what an amazing thing to know that one day perhaps we will be continuing to teach people after our days on earth are over. We can only aspire to such an amazing thing. I miss working with ALEC. I am happy that my wife, Senator Shauna Bolick, continues to be a major participant in ALEC functions. You may wonder how this works. You know, one spouse is a member of the judiciary, the other spouse is a member of the legislature. You know, we've got balance of powers, separation of powers. And that is, in fact, how it works in the real world. But at home, the legislature is in charge. I just wanted to make a few remarks about ALEC and its incredible role. Sometimes when you're really close to something, you don't realize how important and magnificent it is. I remember playing softball on the Capitol Mall when I was at the Institute for Justice, and I'd see this slash, this shadow on our makeshift softball field, and it was the Washington Monument. And you look up and say, wow, I didn't appreciate just how magnificent it is. Well, that is true of an organization like ALEC. One of the roles that ALEC played that is really unsung was during the school choice litigation. Those of you, Shauna and I met at the Heritage Foundation because of our shared passion for education choice and education reform. Now the conversations, those of you who are involved in education policy, they must be so fun because the realm of the possible is literally unlimited. That would not have been the case if a US Supreme Court decision had turned out differently 21 years ago involving the Cleveland School Choice Program, which came down to one vote, the vote of this state's Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor. And to say that it was close, and if we had lost that case, you would be talking not about education savings accounts, religious charter schools, tax credits, vouchers, and so forth. You'd be saying, well, maybe with this Supreme Court, things would turn out differently and we can begin to rebuild. But I'd like to say about that decision that if a single person or a single organization that supported that program didn't do what they did, the result might have been different. And one of those organizations was ALEC. And it played such an incredible role. We knew that a program was going to go up to the United States Supreme Court, but we had no idea which one it would be. So all of them had to be legally defensible. And so we worked with ALEC to design model legislation and leaving the details up to the states, but making sure that there were two ingredients in these school choice programs that would, in our view, ensure their constitutionality. And they happen to be neutrality, meaning that religious schools were only one of the educational options available, and true parental choice, that is, that no money would go to a religious school except by the independent choices of the parents. And ALEC designed these school choice model bills, and a number of states were experimenting in all of those programs. Thanks to that model legislation, had those two ingredients. And we went up to the United States Supreme Court, and by that bare one vote majority, we won. And I'm not sure we would have won if we had had 50 states doing their own things without that incredible, important model legislation that ALEC put forward. Coming full circle back to Antonin Scalia, I'll never forget the court argument in the US Supreme Court over that program. And by that time, I had been arguing against the chief lawyer from the National Education Association, Robert Shannon, so many times that I could not only give his argument, I could give his argument in his voice. And he was a New York labor lawyer, and I'll never forget the moment during the oral argument where he said, "Ioannas, we don't need vouchers, we need more money." And Scalia slaps his own forehead and he said, in his baritone voice that I wish I had, he said, "It's not a money problem, it's a monopoly problem." I just want to leave you with this. Again, something magnificent that is going on that we may not all fully appreciate. This is the golden age of federalism. This is the time where states come to the fore, and instead of the US Supreme Court striking down a lot of what states do, they are actually engaged in returning power to the states. One issue in particular I can't talk about, for example. Seize that moment. Be beacons of freedom. And never have state legislators been more important or frankly more powerful or more in the center of the clash between freedom and tyranny. With that, I just want to say the only Latin phrase that I think is important, carpe diem. Thank you so much for this award.
Please welcome back to the stage, Danny Perez.
Thank you so much, Justice Bullock. Those words should resonate with each and every one of you. And I think I saw that not too long ago. I walked into the education task force, which was packed. And I know everyone here wasn't in that room, but I know several of you were. And I mentioned the importance of that task force because it really is driving the next generation of Americans. But for us here, the next generation of ALEC members that are going to take care of our principles and guide us into the next future of America. And we see where it started. What was the root? And we see the importance of Scalia. And so being able to commemorate Justice Scalia with an honorable man here in the home state of Arizona is an honor for ALEC. So, sir, thank you very much for being here. Congratulations. In addition to being the final day of this conference, today is also the final day that I will serve as the national chairman of ALEC, of the American Legislative Exchange Council. And the experience has been nothing short of amazing. From hosting annual meetings in my home state of Florida to celebrating 50 years of ALEC in Washington, D.C., to all of the model policy discussions and the late night calls from Lisa, asking me to take on just one more task and to make sure that I can keep my butt in the chair for more than 5 minutes. It's been a master class and an honor. But now it is time for me to pass on the gavel to our next national chairman, who's going to be the best national chairman that ALEC has ever seen, and I have absolutely no doubt. His name is Kansas Senate President Ty Masterson. And for those of you who don't know Ty, I promise you, you're going to absolutely love him. He's a little more seasoned than I am. He's a little older, and if you've ever seen him move, you know he doesn't have rhythm like me. In Miami, we call that the Kansas rhythm. But when it comes to understanding leadership, legislative maneuvers, and how our work affects the people that we serve day in and day out, there isn't a leader out there with better moves than Ty. So I thank you for your trust, to everyone in this room, for your time, and more importantly, for your membership with the American Legislative Exchange Council. Without you all, none of this is possible. So not just on my behalf, but on Lisa's behalf, on the board's behalf, thank you to each and every one of you. And in my last official action as the ALEC National Chairman, I would like to introduce you to my friend, my brother. He is the man. He's going to do a great job. Our next National Chairman, Ty Masterson.
Thank you, Danny. Somehow for a young stud Cuban American, I thought your gavel would be a little bigger. So, and for the record, I'm very comfortable with my Kansas rhythm. So, in all seriousness, Danny Perez is an amazing individual that has like not sure there's like giant clown-sized shoes to fill. That guy, I look at him a little bit in awe and what he's done in the years he's served. And so in all seriousness, I mean, it is an honor to take this position. It's also a great responsibility. And I just hope that I can approach the challenge which we have this next year with the same kind of tact and effectiveness that Danny did. So, and to be quite honest, with my competitive nature, I do hope I get to do it a little better. I don't know. But with all that, thank you. Please enjoy your lunch. We'll return to the program shortly.
Please welcome to the stage Alex CEO Lisa B. Nelson.
Thank you. So we're winding down, but we still have a lot more to go. I get the privilege of doing this each year, and we were reminding ourselves that this is the 5th year that we have announced the Peterson Prize, and I just couldn't be more excited to do it. Nicole Hoplin and John Jackson stand as visionary philanthropists at the helm of the renowned Hoplin Jackson Charitable Advisors. As dynamic trailblazers dedicated to reshaping communities and igniting global change, together they have championed numerous initiatives that have reshaped the very essence of philanthropic efforts. Nicole's robust background vividly illustrates a fervent commitment to advancing concepts of free markets and individual liberty. Raising millions of dollars for dozens of causes, she is an author, a fierce advocate, and serves on the Young Americans for Freedom Ronald Reagan Ranch Board of Governors. And complementing Nicole's fervor, John brings a visionary approach to philanthropy that has been instrumental in establishing sustainable programs that are sure to make a lasting impact. Throughout his career, he's overseen operations at the Adolph Coors Foundation, served as the chairman for the Denver area March of Dimes, and serves on the board of the Philanthropy Roundtable right now. Together, with more than 40 years of philanthropic experience, Nicole and John exude an unassailable synergy, combining their individual strengths and perspectives to forge an undeniable force for good. Their steadfast dedication to philanthropy has garnered widespread admiration and respect, rallying others to join their noble pursuit of creating a better and stronger America. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Nicole Hoplin and John Jackson.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your kind words and leadership. The truth is, we couldn't do what we do without patriotic Americans who were willing to invest their time, their treasure into building some truly important causes and nonprofits. So it's really an honor to stand up here today before you. Thank you also to Justice Bolick. Wow, I cannot imagine many other people who have done as much as you have to both build so many important nonprofits, but then your resolute and principled stand on the issues in defense of our Constitution inspires us as well. I have the great privilege, along with my business partner, John Jackson, to serve the Peterson family as their charitable advisors, helping to steward their philanthropy. We want to thank Lisa and all of you here at ALEC especially for hosting once again this year's Gregor G. Peterson Prize in Venture Philanthropy. We are grateful to Lisa for her understanding that nonprofits and donors who support those nonprofit programs go hand in hand with public policy and a limited government especially, because there are gaps that government simply cannot and should not fill in trying to create positive change for our country and to improve the lives of Americans. So it is an honor today to share the results of a years-long process with you and name this year's winner of the prize. But before I do that, I'd like to share a little bit more about Gregor G. Peterson. A San Francisco native and Stanford University alum, he was a patriot. He believed in limited government, free enterprise, and the American dream. He served in the United States Marines and was also a pioneer in venture capital. In 1961, he co-founded one of the very first venture firms on the West Coast called the Sutter Hill Company. In 2019, as a tribute to their father, Eric and Chris Peterson, who are here with us today, created the Gregor G. Peterson Prize in Venture Philanthropy to multiply their father's legacy. The $250,000 prize goes annually to a new nonprofit that honors Greg Peterson's core principles in business. Our mission, our charge, is to identify a nonprofit with bold ideas that enhance the human condition while honoring the touchstone concepts of liberty, equality, and justice. This year, nearly 100 nonprofits were nominated, some by many of you in this room, making the pool of candidates more talented and competitive than ever. As you all know, venture capital is exciting. Venture philanthropy is the same. It means going in big and strong and deep with an institution and building them up with significant resources. But it's also extremely risky. As you know, just like in business, many don't survive the first 2 or 3 years. I'm happy to say, here we are, 5 years after the start of the prize, and every single nonprofit that has won, all those announced right here at ALEC, are thriving today, doing more than we ever could have imagined to help our fellow citizens. These nonprofits have focused on reforming the broken foster care system, defending First Amendment rights, including parental rights and education, reducing recidivism and reforming the criminal justice system, and in keeping politics out of our doctor's office by restoring merit in medicine. We thank ALEC and all of you as members for nominating so many worthy nonprofits. You know your communities better than anyone else. So if you do come across a nonprofit doing excellent work that is relatively young, we are accepting nominations at petersonventureprize.com even now. The deadline is July 1st of 2024. And now I'd like to introduce John Jackson, who is an expert in identifying high-performing nonprofits, to announce this year's winner.
The 2023 Gregor G. Peterson Prize in Venture Philanthropy goes to Children's Entrepreneur Market, a project incubated by Libertas Institute in Utah. rather than a single lemonade stand on a quiet neighborhood street. This initiative organizes large farmers market style events where hundreds of kids come together to sell their goods and services. Having successfully launched in Utah and a half a dozen other states, the Peterson Prize will now help fuel a national expansion to every state by 2026, serving more than 500,000 children each year. The little businessmen and women who participate in these markets, and importantly, their families, learn life-defining lessons about freedom, free markets, and hard work. Any one of these little entrepreneurs could be the next Andy Puzder, thriving entrepreneurs that become the backbone of our American economy. At this point, I would like to invite up the Peterson family and Connor and Lene. Connor and Lene, on behalf of the Peterson family, Lisa Nelson, and all of us gathered here today, congratulations, where are you? Congratulations to the Children Entrepreneur Market and Libertas Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in congratulating them. And now we're going to have Lene say a few words.
Thank you. We are honored and humbled to have been chosen by the Peterson family for this award and are grateful for their support and their vote of confidence in us and in this program. We hope our work to develop young entrepreneurs helps build upon Greg Peterson's legacy of promoting innovation and fighting for a free market. The funds from this prize will help us expand the market program faster than we ever thought possible, bringing this hands-on business experience to hundreds of thousands of kids. Alongside our objective to be in all 50 states within the next 2 years, we are aiming to operate in 200 metropolitan areas by 2029. Many of the families that join us return year after year. The Alvarez family has been participating since our inception, selling their delicious tacos. Abigail, who's 13, works the grill. 11-year-old Isabel takes the orders. And 9-year-old Matthew stands out front, and he will sell you more tacos than you need. Every year, I've watched their business grow, become more efficient, more profitable, and there's always a line of customers at their booth. They recently won a $500 scholarship, and they told me their plans are to buy better storage bins and a wagon to haul their supplies. I asked Abigail if there was a challenge she had to overcome running her business, and she replied, working with my siblings. They are learning valuable life skills as they work together as a family, practicing the fundamentals of running a small business. To give you a glimpse of the magic that happens at the Children's Entrepreneur Market, we brought a news clip that was captured this year in Salt Lake City. We want you to see what a market run by kids looks like, and I guarantee you won't be able to stop smiling. Thank you.
Well, summer is officially underway right now, folks. The lemonade stands and the bake sales, they're popping up probably in your neighborhood. You've seen them out there.
And good for all you little hustlers
Yeah,
out
these
there
kids are
making
doing the
some
work.
money. Good for you. Well, as photojournalist Aubrey Schaefer shows us, one market is helping children take their entrepreneurial goals to the next level.
Pet rocks, come get your pet rock. Or this one.
I'm Whitney. These are my kids, the Hopes kids, and they are little entrepreneurs at heart.
The gold ones are 2, and then the other ones are 1.
And when we found out about this children's entrepreneur market, we knew that this was a great next step for them to pursue their dreams. So we decided to get on board and kind of come join in the fun.
Selling 3D printed stuff and stickers.
Fresh salsa, free samples. It's just a market where kids can sell anything they want.
Oh, here, do you want to see my Pokemon?
It's really incredible to witness.
So we negotiate the price. So, for example, you could get away with that for $1.
They take their businesses very seriously.
How much do you want it for?
You may come and think, oh, they're all going to be lemonade stands.
Strawberry?
But the variety of product is really ingenious.
I'm selling candles.
Homemade jewelry.
Yeah, we all made all of these.
Scrunchies, artwork, 3D printed art.
We made these on the 3D printer. We made these by hand.
They really take a lot of time and thought into their products.
I'm doing some donuts and I'm frying them, and then we're rolling out some dough right now.
That's one of our biggest rules, is that the kids have to do all of the work themselves.
Yeah, the kids run the whole thing. I help set up and that's it. Then I just sit back and I let them do their thing.
It's pretty fun, especially how we're all selling different things. Would you like a bag for it?
Yes.
Okay.
And they come away feeling confident and satisfied after they have this experience.
Mom, I made $8.
Everyone's so supportive of each other and everyone's so excited to see these kids succeed. It's so fun to be a part of it.
Thanks for shopping. Fingers crossed that I sell out, because I worked really hard on these and I just really hope I do. But if not, oh well.
I absolutely
Slow
love
clap those
that.
kids.
What do you think? Cute kids, right? Before an audience such as this, I need to share a bit of the backstory about how we launched this project. So Libertas Institute is a state-based think tank in Utah. And in 2016, there were a whole bunch of news clips coming out that summer of little kids' lemonade stands getting shut down by the government because they didn't have a business license, they didn't have a food handler's permit. One story I remember was a 4-year-old girl named Abigail. She was selling 25-cent cups of lemonade. She got shut down by a local health department worker for not having a $400 permit to sell her lemonade. So we went to the legislature. Where's the Utah delegation at? Do we have some of our friends from Utah here? All right, we got some in the back. So we went to our friends in the legislature and we said, hey, we have a fun idea. What if we legalized entrepreneurship across the board for minors under the age of 18? And so the bill was like 5 lines long. If you're under 18, you don't need any permit, any license. You don't have to collect and remit sales tax. Passed unanimously, because who's going to oppose, cute kids that want to sell lemonade and brownies and things. And so up on the screen, if you're interested, you can find not only the dozen states now that have such a law, but all of the rest of you can get your 5 lines of your model bill that you can take to your legislature. Our program is going to be fully national in 3 years, and a law like this would greatly help these kids to make sure they're not being harassed by anybody. They can go out and just have fun and become very entrepreneurial. So encourage you to go either scan that, or the website is tinyurl.com/ALEC23. It's got our contact info at the bottom. We'd be happy to help you. This is such a fun project. And if you ever go to one of our markets in your community, make sure you set a spending limit for yourself. Otherwise, you will spend a lot of money on all these cute entrepreneurial kids. So we're very honored to be here. Thank you very much to the Peterson family for this recognition, to ALEC for hosting. Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage 2024 ALEC National Chairman, State Senate President, Kansas, Ty Masterson.
All
right, thank you, Connor, Lene, Peterson fam. Thank you very much for coming, sharing that with us. I actually have my 11-year-old daughter. It was a lot more complicated because we didn't have that model legislation. Made $600 doing a child fair at 11. So I love the whole concept. But now I get to introduce our keynote speaker. Andy Puzder is a titan of the business arena with a remarkable journey that benefited with his entrepreneurship, leadership, and legal prowess. He's made an incredible impact on the corporate landscape, formerly overseeing beloved brands like Hardee's and Carl's Jr., and now pushing back against politicized investment practices like ESG. His influence can be felt in every boardroom, classroom, and business classroom around the country. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew Franklin Puzder.
Thank you, Ty. Thanks for that introduction. And I want to thank Lisa and Jonathan for inviting me here to speak. And Danny's gone, but it's nice to be here at the end of his reign with Alec and the beginning of Ty's. Since 2018, let me get organized here. Since 2018, and more openly over the past 2 years, we've been all dealing with an insidious neo-Marxist investment strategy known as ESG investing. Now, my starting this talk with a phrase like neo-Marxist may have surprised you, but I believe we need to call it what it is. Elon Musk calls it communism rebranded. He also called it the devil incarnate, and he's dramatic, and if you saw his comments yesterday, you know he's dramatic. But he's not necessarily wrong. So let's take a deep dive on what ESG actually is, how it impacts our free market economy, how the firms that manage your state's monies, for those of you who are legislators, how they get away with putting ESG considerations over the financial interests of your constituents, and why Alec's fiduciary duty model legislation is so very important. Now, while everyone here today knows what ESG stands for, environmental, social, and governance, just 2 years ago, very few people knew even that. Of course, that was the intent. ESG was designed as an innocent-sounding ruse to conceal what it really meant for American businesses. That's part of the reason it took so long to figure out what financial firms and their CEOs, such as Larry Fink, were actually up to. In reality, ESG is socialism in sheep's clothing. It empowers a class of financial elites to make economic decisions for us. It creates a shortcut around the ballot box to coerce the CEOs of American companies to implement a progressive policy agenda and put that agenda above their obligation to generate returns for investors. It accomplishes this goal by empowering an elite group of financial managers who invest other people's money so they can use those monies to advance a collectivist political agenda. Even today, few people really understand the extent to which ESG has permeated all of our lives. And again, that's intentional and due in part to the fact that the left is really good at doing things surreptitiously. Even what they call themselves keeps changing as people figure out what they actually support. Marxists, communists, socialists, progressives, globalists, they all refer to essentially the same thing: a collectivist mentality that diminishes us as individuals and enhances the power of a group of elites. They just change the name whenever people actually figure out what they're up to. So let's talk about surreptitious. ESG doesn't even have a definition. There isn't even anything accepted that where you can go and look and see what ESG includes. It simply includes any political agenda items that progressives, as they most commonly call themselves today, wanted to include. Now, we all know it at least includes radical environmental policies. This is the big one, the E in ESG. Klaus Schwab's and the World Economic Forum's a net zero by 2050 emissions goals that would destroy our economy, if not the global economy, as current events continue to demonstrate, driving people into poverty and increasing human suffering. The S in ESG is synonymous with DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, another innocuous sounding ruse that's permeated America's corporate culture. I'm going to use the term ESG in this talk, but the S, that it is synonymous with the acronym DEI, which includes, for example, critical race theory human resource training, teaching employees that they're either victims or oppressors based solely on their race or their sex. Now, why would any rational employer teach employees that they're victims and being oppressed by other employees based solely on their race or their sex? That's something they can't even change. that hardly promotes the teamwork that's essential to running a successful business, which leads to the G, or the governance part of ESG. The G includes discriminatory board appointments, where you put people on your board of directors based on their race or their sex rather than their qualifications, merit, or character. Now that's something I've been fighting my entire professional career. As many of you know, Martin Luther King back in the early 1960s said that he looked forward to a day when people would be judged on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Well, here we are 60 years later, thanks to ESG, making decisions based on the color of a person's skin rather than the content of their character. And that seems to be the in thing to do in corporate America. And that's just a few of the policies that ESG has been employed to advance, all with the thin veneer of leftist morality and collective action. We could also discuss things like Black Lives Matter, promoting abortion at the corporate level, really anything that the left wants to promote, it promotes through ESG. But the most important point about ESG is that it transcends specific issues. It's whatever the current guardians of leftist morality say that it is. So let's talk about what ESG is at its core, which is much more important than any particular issue. At its core, ESG is a rejection of our founding principles and our Judeo-Christian values. It undermines representative democracy, it undermines our economic freedom, and it undermines our individual liberty. It threatens our democracy because it's a shortcut around the ballot box that these massive financial firms use to implement leftist policies that simply lack popular support. It threatens our economic freedom because they use their massive shareholdings to compel the CEOs of the companies in which they invest to put these policies above their obligation to generate returns for shareholders or profits. And it threatens our individual liberty because they use our money to do it. Our 401k plans, our savings, our pension funds, and very likely the pension funds, many state funds for many of the states which you represent. It's a tool to empower corporate and government elites to use the American private sector as a means to avoid the inconvenience and messiness they see with our representative democracy and our free market economy. They prefer to have corporate elites set our nation's policies. In other words, them, not us, because they don't trust us to make decisions, the best decisions for ourselves, our nation, or our planet. And at the heart of their effort to advance this ESG agenda is the villainization of profit as an oppressive force that drives poverty, inequality, and if you believe the rhetoric, threatens the very existence of our planet. But what they're really attacking is the notion unique to free market capitalism, that you can improve your life through your own effort. You can profit through your own efforts. President Reagan believed that the concepts of profit and freedom were inextricably inseparable. And as usual, he was correct. It's the profit motive, the fact that everybody has the freedom and the opportunity to better their lives that drives our great engine of economic prosperity. The left knows that profit is the heart and soul of free market capitalism. So the profit motive is their target, their enemy, their villain, the villain they would destroy or defeat. To do so, they attempt to reorient modern corporations so that rather than focusing on profits or shareholder returns, they focus on advancing leftist political goals, which they frame as efforts to save the world. Now, some of you may say, well, maybe not this group, but there may be groups that would say, and maybe you know people who would say, isn't that a good thing? Isn't there too much poverty, too much inequality, too much carbon? And what's so great about capitalism? Isn't it better if companies pursue these social and political goals rather than profits? Won't that result in a better world? Or the simple answer is no, it won't result in a better world. In fact, the profit motive has proven to be the only effective driver of global prosperity. It's moral and its impact is benevolent. Now, that certainly isn't what you're going to read in the New York Times, but I believe it's an indisputable fact, one of many that the New York Times gets wrong. Why? Well, as I hope everyone in this group knows, or at least intuits, in a free market economy, businesses profit only by meeting the needs of others. Capitalism encourages people to improve their lives by providing the products or services that others want at a price they can afford. In this sense, businesses striving for profits benefit other people and society as a whole. Now, that's more altruistic than it is greedy. When I was the CEO of CKE Restaurants, we spent literally millions of dollars every year trying to figure out what consumers wanted. What kind of burgers did you want, and how could we offer them to you at a price you could afford? You know, under capitalism, knowing what your customer wants and offering it at an affordable price is not only the key to success, it's the key to survival. Under capitalism, we've got a form literally of economic democracy where consumers vote. You vote with every dollar you spend, determining which companies, which businesses succeed and which fail. Consumers have the economic power, not government or corporate elites, because it isn't government or corporate elites that decide what businesses must do to succeed or fail. It's consumers. Capitalism empowers the common man and the common woman because every business needs their votes for its success, and they compete for that vote, trying to provide the most benefit to the broadest number of people. Now, that may not be truly altruistic conduct, since capitalism does depend on our natural desire to better our lives, but it channels that natural desire into focusing on the needs of others. You improve your life by satisfying other people's needs. I mean, it's a heck of a motivator if you think about it. Henry Ford built cars for the common man and the common woman, not kings, queens, and nobility of his day. Steve Jobs came up with the iPhone, or the idea of a smartphone, for all of us, not for government or corporate elites. And Jeff Bezos, he became tremendously wealthy, often criticized for it, but he became tremendously wealthy because he provided us with tremendous benefits. He created the greatest distribution system in the history of the world. Now, none of these individuals became wealthy because they stole from us. They became tremendously wealthy because they provided us with tremendous benefits. From Ford to Bezos and Musk to the family that runs your local pizza joint or burger joint. In a free market economy, we benefit to the extent we benefit others. So throughout our history as a nation, self-made men and women, free from government interference, have forged ahead with innovative ideas and solutions that created jobs, wealth, and prosperity, not only for themselves, but for the entire nation. They improved their fortunes and in the process, the lives of their fellow citizens and the human condition. Now, nonetheless, some of you may still wonder, come on, Andy, does free market capitalism really improve the lives of ordinary people? Or is it just improving the lives of the ultra wealthy, the Fords, the Bezoses, the Musks? So I'm here to confirm, in fact, capitalism, free markets driven by the profit motive, have produced the greatest wealth in human history, lifting billions of people out of poverty worldwide. And you don't have to take my word for it. Even President Obama stated at Georgetown University in 2015 that, quote, "We don't dispute that the free market is the greatest producer of wealth in history. It has lifted billions of people out of poverty." And he was right, and that's not something I say about him a lot. Here's a graph that proves it. This chart, oops, back one. Come on, go back. There we go. This chart takes data going back to 1820 when capitalism began its rise. The blue line is based on data from an economist named Angus Madison, an English economist, who tracked the historic growth of GDP per capita, or economic growth per person worldwide. The red line is from World Bank data, also going back to 1820, and showing the percentage of people that were living in extreme poverty throughout that period of time. So two different data sources. And as you can see, they move in tandem. As GDP per capita increased, people living in extreme poverty decreased. And it wasn't just the wealthy who saw benefits. 90% of the world's population was living in extreme poverty in 1820. If you add in just regular poverty, it goes up to 94%. And that had been true for millennia. Today, the number's under 10%. It actually got down to about 8% pre-pandemic and is heading back down to 8% now that we're post-pandemic. This is the benevolence and the power of free market capitalism. And free market capitalism works because people are free to focus on generating profits. The greater the potential for profit, the greater the risks people are willing to take, the greater the investments people are willing to make, and the greater the associated economic growth, all resulting in broad-based prosperity and the greatest reduction in human suffering and extreme poverty in history. Now, all this tremendous energy is generated by the profit motive, people striving to meet other people's needs as the key to improving their lives. It's an incredible energy. To the extent we allow ESG to reorient modern businesses toward accomplishing social or political objectives rather than making a profit, we place the tremendous benefits of this profit-based system at risk. Now, what sane person would want that? Like, why endanger a system that has created unprecedented human prosperity, lifting billions of people out of poverty, reducing human suffering to its lowest level ever, as even someone as far left as President Obama has had to acknowledge? Well, the answer is a familiar refrain throughout the history of socialism. Rather than empowering the common man and common woman with economic power, ESG empowers a class of elites who believe they can manage our lives better than we can. It's about exerting power over people, not transferring it, and then transferring it to the collectivist elites, as Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan's good friend, showed back in the 1980s. And everywhere and every time these collectivist policies have been tried, socialism, communist, whatever you want to call it, whatever they want to call it, it has failed. You know, think about the former Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, or China before red capitalism. Socialism's one predominant feature is failure. So given socialism's dismal history and the benevolence of capitalism, how in a relatively short period of time did ESG proponents gain such incredible momentum, virtually turning corporate America on its head? Well, the ESG era began in this sad collectivist history back in 2018, when BlackRock CEO Larry Fink sent his annual letter to CEOs titled "A Sense of Purpose." As you all likely know, Fink sends an annual letter to CEOs telling them what he expects from them in the coming year. It's almost like he thinks he's their boss. At first, Fink's letter talked about what he and BlackRock were seeing that the CEOs of the companies in which BlackRock invested might find useful in the coming year when they were running the companies that they manage. Nothing wrong with that. In 2018, that changed, and it changed dramatically. Fink's 2018 letters to CEOs was a stunning exercise of raw financial power. It directed America's CEOs to turn their businesses from engines of economic production into drivers of progressive social policy goals. According to Fink's 2018 letter, our society, not Fink, mind you, our society was demanding that companies now serve a social purpose, and that going forward, every company must show how it made a positive contribution to society. Now, that was a monumental change. The leftist media touted Fink's letter as a direct rebuttal to Milton Friedman, who wrote in a great and influential New York Times piece in 1970 that the social responsibility of business is to increase profits. If you haven't seen that 1970 op-ed, pull it up. It's really, really excellently done. Bloomberg, when Fink's letter came out, claimed that Fink's letter had the effect of kneecapping, quote, kneecapping Friedman's dictum, upending a half century of business thought. Well, they were right. But they failed to note that half century since Friedman's article had been the most prosperous in human history, with unprecedented reductions in poverty and human suffering. But when Friedman wrote about the importance of profit, he was really just restating the very notion that led to 200 years of prosperity. Friedman didn't invent this. It had been going on for 200 years. So why did anybody listen to Fink? Well, because he is the CEO of BlackRock, he has tremendous, tremendous power. BlackRock is a financial monster, and a monster the public company CEOs in the United States cannot ignore. With its $10 trillion in assets under management, BlackRock has at least a 5% ownership, and it is the first, second, or third largest shareholder in 97.5% of the companies in the S&P 500. So nearly 100% of the 500 largest companies in America. So when Fink directs America's CEOs to turn their businesses from engines of economic production to drivers of progressive social policy, they had to at least listen. As a CEO in America, you ignore Larry Fink at your peril. Now, some of you who are attorneys or have worked on fiduciary duty issues may wonder, how could he do that? I mean, he's investing other people's money. How can he direct these companies in which he invests their monies for other people to focus on social issues rather than his clients' financial interests? That's a good question. Even BlackRock has acknowledged that as an asset manager, it is a fiduciary duty. It is a fiduciary, and it owes a fiduciary duty that requires it to, quote, prioritize its client's financial interest. Remember that. The three key words here are client, prioritize, financial interest. This is, in your states, this is the teachers, the policemen, the firemen, the state employees that are the beneficiaries of the pension funds that your state has set up. BlackRock has an obligation to those clients to prioritize their financial interest. Now, Fink knew that this fiduciary duty thing was a problem when he drafted his 2018 letter. So how did he address it? Well, as some of you may know, BlackRock is an index or passive asset manager. So rather than recommending, what that means is rather than recommending investments in specific companies, BlackRock sells ETFs or mutual funds, their products, consisting of a group or an index of companies that represent a segment of the financial market based on shared attributes. That sounds complicated, but let's say it's the S&P 500. That's the 500 largest companies in America. That's their shared attribute. And by the way, the S&P 500 index is the most common index that's used, and it's BlackRock's largest product is based on the S&P 500 index. So when you look to the performance of BlackRock, you look to the performance of that product, which consists of 500 companies, not 10 or 20 or 50 companies that BlackRock picked out of the S&P. You're doing it based on shared attributes, not on an analysis of the performance of each company. And as a passive investor, BlackRock satisfies its fiduciary responsibility by selecting an index of stocks like the S&P 500, setting up a passive index fund like an ETF of the companies in that index, and having its clients invest, and then allowing each company in the index to succeed to the best of its individual ability, creating the greatest collective financial success for BlackRock's clients. If you invest in the S&P 500, you have the 500 CEOs of the 500 largest American companies trying to make a profit for you. I mean, this is an incredible power. BlackRock's role certainly wasn't to dictate strategic or operating policies to those CEOs or to any of the companies in the indexes it sets up in which BlackRock invests, based on BlackRock's management team sitting in their Manhattan offices deeming what is socially desirable. They were to set up an index, passively allow the companies in the index to perform, then call it passive. They call it passive investing for a reason. It's not because you're an activist, it's because you're passive. So how did BlackRock, a passive fund manager, become an activist investor that was now encouraging companies to go along with, or really compelling companies to prioritize these progressive socialist issues and political goals rather than its clients' financial interest? How could it do so and still be acting consistent with its fiduciary duty to prioritize its clients' financial interests? That is, again, the interest of some of your constituents. Well, it couldn't. I mean, Fink knew that. He knew he had to transform BlackRock's fiduciary duty to allow him to prioritize social issues over his clients' financial interests. And he considered himself up to the task. You know, with the logic that is somewhat difficult to follow, Fink claimed that investors' increasing use of index funds, they're very popular because they're very inexpensive, because you don't have to do a lot of research, and they track, they really track the American market and whatever market segment you're picking, and they're very successful. The returns are very good. But Fink claimed that popularity was driving, quote, a transformation in BlackRock's fiduciary responsibility. He claimed that fiduciary transformation was necessary because as a passive investor, BlackRock was unable to, quote, express its disapproval, close quote, with respect to underperforming company by selling the company's securities as long as the company was qualified to stay in the index. Well, of course, of course that was the case. He was a passive investor, right? You can't punish individual companies. That literally is the point of passive investing. An index fund manager creates a passive investment product based on an index rather than investing in individual companies, and then looks to the performance of the group. You can't take companies out of the group or stick different companies in. like, for example, the S&P 500. Again, not any particular company's performance within the group. A passive fund manager doesn't do the research an active fund manager does, or a stock picker, as you might call them, to select specific stocks in which to invest, which is why passive investment funds are so much cheaper. You don't do the research on every company. You don't monitor every company. And because you don't do the research, you really don't know what's best for each of the thousands of companies in which these financial monsters like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard invest. They're supposed to leave the strategic decisions to each company's board and operating decisions to the company's management team. Fink was arguing for think about this. He was arguing for a transformation of BlackRock's fiduciary responsibility. So BlackRock, as a passive investor, could be an active investor to set direction for the companies in which it passively invested. In other words, he was claiming that the success of index investing meant that fund managers had to abandon passive investing. The logic was circular, the irony was palpable, and the betrayal of BlackRock's clients was clear. But Fink had to do more than transform BlackRock into an activist investor to reorient all these American companies. He also had to transform the very law governing fiduciary responsibilities. He had to do it in two respects if he was going to actively compel companies to execute his policies. First, existing law governing fiduciary duties only protected BlackRock's clients. Remember the three words: client, prioritize, financial interest. So he had to expand it beyond his clients. Second, the law required BlackRock to prioritize the client's financial interest, not society's interest. This was protections for people that actually invested funds. So step one was expanding beyond its client base, the group to whom BlackRock owed a fiduciary duty. And the solution, you might have heard of this concept, it's called stakeholder capitalism. According to Fink, rather than just investors as traditional fiduciary duty required, the companies in which BlackRock invested must benefit all of their stakeholders, not just their shareholders, who were BlackRock's clients, but also employees, customers, and the communities in which the business operated. You know, when you owe a fiduciary duty to multiple groups, it's much easier to claim that your actions are in some other stakeholder's best interest or society's best interest, though perhaps not in the best interest of your clients. So this gave BlackRock wiggle room. But if BlackRock was now an activist investor that would no longer prioritize its clients' financial interests, what interest did it want companies to prioritize? Well, that leads us to step two, which is redefining what a fiduciary can do consistent with the scope of its duties that it owes to this new, broader stakeholder group. Now, Fink didn't want to be bogged down with any particular group of issues. He needed something broad and inclusive. So enters ESG. Fink left little doubt that ESG was to be every company's guiding light going forward. His letter stated, a company's ability to manage environmental, social, and governance matters demonstrates the leadership and governance that is so essential to growth, which is why we, BlackRock, are increasingly integrating these issues into our investment process. Of course, as I mentioned, there's no definition for what ESG includes. It simply includes whatever the left or Larry Fink wants it to include. So how would he accomplish this incredible transformation? Certainly no new laws were passed. You guys didn't pass any authorizing the transformation of fiduciary duties. Wasn't a problem for Fink. For example, he is an unabashed advocate and crusader for the most radical environmental policies, such as the World Economic Forum's globalist net zero by 2050 policies. In his 2021 letter to America's CEOs, he literally stated that there is no company whose business model won't be profoundly affected by the transition to a net zero economy, which he said would require a transformation of the entire economy. Now understand, that is the goal. He wants to transform our entire economy. Fink said the quiet part out loud. The left is using climate change to transform our entire economy, and Fink is driving that change. Now, did any of you vote for Fink, empowering him to literally transform our entire economy? As that's what he intends to do. But how did Fink think he could personally transform our entire economy? Well, he wasn't shy about it. In Fink's own words, behaviors are going to have to change. And this is one thing we are asking companies here at BlackRock. You have to enforce behavior. And at BlackRock, we are forcing behavior. With his thumb on BlackRock's incredible proxy voting power, Fink believed he could simply force the policies he supported on our nation without the consent of the governed, let alone his investors, many of whom certainly disagree with his policies. How? Well, he would simply force American companies to literally transform the entire economy. And he wasn't bragging about what he could do, he actually was doing it. As some of you may recall, in that same year, 2021, Exxon, America's largest energy producer, an incredible, successful, and powerful company, tracing its roots back to John D. Rockefeller, was facing a challenge from a minor insurgent shareholder called Engine Number One that wanted to put environmentalists on Exxon's board. You know, people at first thought it was a joke. The Exxon's management reasonably opposed it and they would win. But to ensure that environmentalists were put on Exxon's board, BlackRock used its massive proxy voting power to support Engine Number One and voted against Exxon's profit-focused management team. As a result, environmentalists were elected to Exxon's board. As absurd as it sounds, within less than a year, Exxon, our nation's largest and most profitable oil company, adopted a net zero carbon by 2050 policy. So America's preeminent oil company now supports severely reducing, if not eliminating, the very product that justifies its existence. And there you have ESG in a nutshell. Does anyone think destroying demand for Exxon's products prioritizes the financial interests of Exxon's investors, that is BlackRock's clients? Obviously it does not, but it did advance one of Fink's pet social goals, radical environmental policy. Now, fortunately, people noticed. More than anything else, this vote on Exxon woke people up, particularly red state governors, treasurers, attorney generals, and legislators such as yourselves. It was now patently obvious that asset managers such as BlackRock were successfully using their state's monies to advance progressive political issues. BlackRock couldn't advance at the ballot box because the issues lacked popular support. So beginning in 2021, red states started passing legislation to resist this ESG juggernaut, including 12 states that have restricted the use of ESG by requiring that asset managers focus on their traditional fiduciary duties to prioritize returns for the beneficiaries of the funds in their states, as opposed to BlackRock's and these other investment firms' personal, social, or political goals. We call it the fiduciary duty approach. It's on ALEC's website, and it's also the first issue mentioned in this booklet that Jonathan handed me just before I got up here. So it's 2024 Essential Policy Solutions. As I said, we call it the fiduciary duty approach. A lot of people worked on this. Heritage also has model legislation on this. I think the ALEC bill is very good. The Heritage bill is good. They're very similar. So we've got model legislation out there. We've got states that have passed it. If your state hasn't passed it, please speak to someone at ALEC. Speak to Jonathan Williams or speak to me. This is extremely important legislation that strikes at the heart of the ESG threat. Now, some people have also passed what's called contracting legislation, which prohibits boycotting certain industries if they boycotting certain companies if they refuse to do business with the state, if they boycott an industry. That legislation is very important for dealing with ESG supporting companies such as banks and insurance companies. The fiduciary duty approach is what we're using for firms like BlackRock, because BlackRock actually doesn't boycott these energy companies. It invests in energy companies because they're in the S&P 500. So Exxon, Marathon, whatever company's in there, they invest. States have also withdrawn money from BlackRock. Basically, about $4.8 billion to date have been withdrawn from BlackRock because of its ESG policies. Now, because of these efforts, we've seen a momentum shift. In fact, the ESG resistance is now living in Larry Fink's head, and he seems stunned. Speaking at the Aspen Ideas Festival in June, Fink stated that he doesn't even use the word ESG anymore because it's been entirely weaponized. Our business was hurt. We lost $4 billion of mandates. I'm ashamed to be part of this conversation. But seriously, he's the guy that started the conversation. He's also proudly its lead advocate. Now even mentioning the acronym ESG creeps him out. But look, this isn't over. I mean, we've had a change in momentum thanks to that Exxon vote waking people up. But this is far from over. In fact, in that same meeting in June, Fink stated that while he no longer uses ESG, he believes in conscientious capitalism, which is really just ESG in sheep's clothing. As I said before, people figure out what they're doing, they just change the name and they think nobody's going to notice. Now, this is a generational fight. This is a fight where we all need to stand up. And some of you may be reluctant to enter the fray, concerned about the risks that you might offend. I mean, politicians out there, you don't want to offend anybody, and I certainly understand that. Business people feel the same way. So let me leave you with some words from Ronald Reagan in a 1977 speech on the collectivist threat of his time at Hillsdale College. He addressed the reluctance of some business people to stand up to the collectivists of his time, saying, "If some among you fear taking a stand because you're afraid of reprisals from customers, clients, or government, recognize you are just feeding the crocodile, hoping he eats you last." As the guardians of your constituents' interests and defenders of our republic, you stand at the forefront of this fight. It's so important that you take up the mantle. This is your time. This is your fight. You cannot rest, you cannot waver, you cannot retreat. If we're to pass the freedoms and prosperity we inherited onto that generation of kids that were in the video we saw earlier. May God bless each one of you. May God bless Alec, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please welcome back to the stage, Ty Masterson.
All right, real quick. Thank you, Andy. I'm always impressed by people that are his level of accomplishment and personal resource that still continue to invest time. You're irreplaceable resource educating us. So thank you. Real quick, before everybody leaves, don't forget the task force we still have remaining that begin right after lunch. If you haven't taken advantage of your care media training yesterday, please do that now. We have a very busy year coming up in 24, not just with our state elections, but the federal elections. And with that, we must stand strong to our principles. And thank you for being here.